Hey guys, my name is Alicia and today I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own Frye Boot style harness. If you guys are unaware, Frye Boots have become super popular over the last years, both the campus boot style and the moto boot style. I feel like we really started to see them styled this past summer paired with like shorts or a short skirt, and I, as many others, really started to fall in love with that look. But Frye Boots can be pretty hard to find and they are quite expensive. So fast forwarding a bit, I ended up finding these boots in my last collective thrift haul, and they have a very similar silhouette to the Frye campus boot. So I feel like that kind of satisfied my campus boot urge, but I still had those moto boots on my mind. It wasn't until I stumbled across this TikTok from the shoe brand of Maguire shoes where they had designed this boot that actually had a completely removable strap, and I just thought that was genius because it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You got the campus boot and the moto boot combined into one. My first thought was, where do I buy this? Like, I need to buy that strap to add to my existing boots. But unfortunately, they do not sell it separately. You do have to buy it with the boot, and the boots are quite expensive. I think they're like close to $500. But then my second thought was, wait, I could totally make that, which is honestly usually how most of my DIY projects come to be. So that is exactly what I did. I made my very own little harness strap, and I'm going to show you guys in this video exactly how you can do it too. So I had previously actually never worked with leather before. You guys know I'm definitely more into sewing, like that is where my skill set lies. But luckily my friend Deanna actually has experienced leatherworking and she offered to help me with this project, which I'm so grateful for. And even though she did guide me a lot through this, I honestly do think this project is totally beginner friendly if you've never done leatherworking before. And I feel confident that after this video, pretty much anybody could pull this off. So the design is actually super simple. Each boot strap contains 3 different straps that you can see here. One for the front of the boot, one for the back of the boot, and one for the bottom of the boot here. It looks very like a BDSM by itself. And what actually allows this harness to be removable is that one side of the bottom strap here actually has snap buttons and completely comes undone just like that. This is what allows you to be able to slide the harness on and then just clip it back on underneath. So now that you guys understand how this works and have the basic design in mind, you can start making the prototype. Creating the prototype is very important in order to get proper measurements for your harness because, you know, no two boots are gonna have the same measurements. Your boot that you're using might be a little wider around the ankle or might have a higher heel that you need to account for. You definitely do not want to skip this step. I will provide the measurements that I used, but you want to make this custom to your own boot. And this is really important because your measurements are going to determine how much leather you're actually going to need. So I just built mine from cardboard strips that I had cut out and little rings made from picture hanging wire. Basically just random things I had lying around to make it work. This is definitely going to take a little bit of finagling to try to get the right size and to tighten it into the right place. You're definitely going to have to make adjustments as you go. And like I said, I'm going to share my measurements with you guys just to give you maybe a little bit of a starting point, but definitely adjust as needed. And some important tips to remember while you're doing this is, for one, make sure your cardboard strips are 1 1/4 inches wide and that your O-rings are 1.5 inches in diameter. That is the width of the leather and the size of the O-rings that I ended up using. You can switch this up, but I feel like this is kind of the closest match to the Frye and Maguire boots, and I think it ended up working out and looking good. But you can definitely use a smaller ring if you want. You can make the leather thinner if you want. I honestly wouldn't go any thicker or larger than this. My next tip is you're going to want to leave an extra 3.5 centimeters on both sides of your prototype. That way you're going to be able to fold those edges in and there's going to be enough space to add the actual rivets here. And lastly, when you're adjusting the front and back straps, you just want to make sure that this bottom strap does end up sitting right up against the heel here. You don't want it sitting too far forward like that. So those are definitely some things you want to keep in mind while making your prototype. And once your prototype is complete, you can go ahead and measure out all of your cardboard strips so that you can see how much leather you're going to need. If you're only making one prototype, just make sure you're doubling it for the other boot as well. So now that we have our measurements, we can actually go ahead and buy our materials. So I ended up going to like my local proper leather store for this, which I would definitely recommend going in person. I know probably not everyone has a specialty leather store near them, but if you can go in person, it's just better to see everything in real life, see the measurements, see how it's going to work together, ask the people there any questions. Like, they were super helpful for me. I will also leave a link to all the products I used in the description, and you can actually purchase it from the same store that I bought it from. So for materials, of course, obviously we're gonna need our leather, and like I said, this is gonna obviously depend on the measurements that you did in the last part, but for me, I ended up needing about 5 feet of leather. They do sell it by the foot. When I purchased mine, I ended up getting a little extra than what I needed, just in case like I made a mistake or something like that, but I honestly wouldn't recommend this. Like, I would try to get the exact amount you need, because if you screw up one whole strap, like, you're gonna need a lot of extra leather for that. So I would say just try to be very precise, and if you really screw up and you need to buy leather, like, just buy it separately after so you know exactly how much you'll need, because it's kind of a waste of money buying extra that you're not going to use, obviously. The next thing you're going to need is obviously the O-rings, so you're going to need 4 of those for both boots, and like I mentioned before, you want the 1.5 inch sized O-rings. Next, we're going to need our rivets. Rivets are actually sold separately between the post and the caps. This is something I didn't know, but I learned through this project. I somehow accidentally skipped over the explanation of the posts, but basically the post length determines how many layers the rivet will hold together. And you're gonna want the post to be slightly longer than the thickness of your leather. So in this case, the leather I used was about 4 millimeters per side. Once it's folded together, it's gonna be closer to 8, but we are actually gonna be shaving this down quite a bit. So I'm pretty sure I ended up going with either the 5 millimeter or the 7 millimeter post. Either is gonna work. Since we can shave this down, we do have the flexibility with the post. And the reason that the post and the caps are sold separately is so that you have the flexibility of choosing your post based on how thick your leather is practically going to be, and choosing your cap based on either style purposes or how wide your leather is going to be, because it's not always going to be consistent. For the caps, I believe I ended up going with 9 millimeters, and that's just basically like the width of how big the actual rivet is. And I think it looks quite nice. I wouldn't go any bigger because I feel like there would not be enough space on the harness for it, but that worked out for me. You're gonna need 20 rivet posts and 20 rivet caps for this project. You probably will have to buy a pack that includes more, but just a heads up. And then lastly, we just need the snap buttons to finish off that final strap. We only need 4 of them, but they do come in a 10 pack, and this actually comes with all the components you need. Unlike the rivets where you have to buy the pieces separately, this should have everything. I found that the snap buttons varied in sizes compared to the actual rivets, so my snap buttons ended up being a little bit bigger than the actual rivets. I believe the rivets were 9 millimeters and the snaps were 12.5 millimeters. You can definitely tell if you look close up, but from afar, you wouldn't even notice. Honestly, sometimes I have a hard time figuring out which one is the snap one that I have to undo. So if you're a little bit off there, not a problem. So that is all the materials you need, but we're also going to be needing some tools for this project as well. So the first thing that you're going to need for leather making in general, specifically for this project, is a precision craft knife. This is basically just an X-Acto knife to cut the leather. You are going to need a hammer. Probably have one lying around, it's totally fine. If not, you can get this wooden mallet, that totally works. Next, you will need some setting tools. This is basically what you use in order to attach the rivets to the leather. And you're gonna need a rivet setter, a snap setter, and a rivet anvil. You are also gonna need a skiver. This basically is a tool that shaves the leather, and it is essential because the leather does come quite thick and you will have to shave it down in order to add the rivets. And then lastly, you just need a leather hole punch. You might actually already have this if you have adjusted like your belt size before, but this is basically what we're going to use to create the holes that the rivets go into. So I'm not gonna lie, this project can be on the pricier side, especially if you're buying a lot of these tools for the first time. If you already have some of them, that does make a big difference. But at the end of the video, I'm definitely going to go in a little more depth, like weighing in if I think this project is worth it and the actual total that it's going to cost you. But it could also spark up a new hobby of leather making, so it's definitely things to keep in mind. So now that we have all of the supplies we need, we can actually get started on assembling. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is cut your strips the proper length from your prototype using our precision craft knife. Cutting the leather may take a few cuts, like it's not going to go clean through right away. You are going to have to work at it. Once all of your strips are cut to the proper length, we can prep the ends. So like I said before, 3.5 centimeters roughly is about how much you want to be able to fold over. So go ahead and just measure that from the end of your strip. And you just want to add these little triangle cutouts. Like you can see right here, that is just going to make the strap a little easier to bend and give it a little more space to actually wrap around that O-ring there. And it's going to make room for all 3 straps. Next, we can go in with our leather hole punch and cut out 2 holes on either side of the triangle cutouts, making sure they're spaced out far enough for the rivets, because this is basically the holes we're creating to add the rivets in here. And once you do figure out that hole placement, you can actually trace it onto a piece of paper and use it as a template to create the rest of your straps, and it's just going to make the process go a lot faster, so you don't have to be like super precise every time. Next, you're going to fold the strap over the O-ring and add in your rivets, making sure that the rivet cap is on the outside and the post is on the inside. You're likely gonna have to shave your leather down at this point to make it thin enough for the post to go through both of those layers of leather. And then once everything's in place, you can just go ahead and hammer the rivets in using the Rivet Setter tool. And that's what's actually gonna hold that fold in place. Then you can just go ahead and repeat that process for all of your straps. Some tips for assembling: you want to start with the upper straps first, so the front and the back straps, and I would actually recommend attaching the front and the back to the same O-ring first rather than doing just the front to both O-rings. That just allows you to have a little bit more freedom when making adjustments. You really want this measurement to be precise to fit perfectly over the ankle of your boot. So once your front and back straps are attached, then we can go in and add the bottom strap. And the process is exactly the same until you get to the final closure, because of course we do want to make it removable, so we do have to add the snap buttons. And the application process is a little bit different for the snap buttons than the rivets. So the snaps actually have 4 different components: the post, the stud, the socket, and the cap. So the post and the stud attach on the inside of the strap, while the socket and the cap attach on the outside, and all together they snap together just like that. So here I'm adding the cap first and then the socket to the other side. And this is where you're gonna need the snap setter and the Rivet Anvil to put it all together. And then you can do the same thing, but this time with the post and the stud. Just make sure the stud and the socket are facing so that they can actually snap together, because those are the 2 pieces that attach. And that is all there is to it. All there is. There's a lot, but I feel like it's very repetitive. So before I give my full analysis of this project, how I think it went, maybe some other options if you're not willing to go through and make this all, and also if I think it's worth it, money-wise. I'm gonna get into all of that in a second, but first, Jaden's actually sent me their thermal printer to give a try and just give my honest thoughts on. If you guys didn't know, I run a Depop shop and I have shipped literally hundreds of packages over the years, and shipping has just always been my least favorite part of the whole process, mostly because generally printers are just so difficult to work with for some reason. Setting up the printer just takes so much time, and God forbid you run out of paper halfway through printing. So I am so happy that Jaden sent me over their little thermal printer to try, because it has been genuinely such a game changer. It's an eighth of the size of my giant massive printer back there. And if you guys didn't know, what's special about thermal printers is that they actually don't require any ink. They use a special paper that already has the ink built in, and your print comes out with the heat. This is actually so much cheaper. It's the reason why people buy thermal printers. Right now on the Jaden's website, you can get 500 labels for 20 bucks. And I was shocked at how easy this was to set up and use. Like, it just like started working right away, which is not my usual experience with printers. And the fact that this is connected by Bluetooth is such a game changer. I literally printed my labels straight from my phone. I genuinely wish I had this printer at the beginning of my shipping journey. I would highly recommend it. I'm gonna leave a link in my description. It's an affiliate link, so they know that I sent you, and you will also get a discount code. So if you ship a lot of packages as well, maybe you're gonna start a leather making business, then I'd highly recommend, because I honestly no longer dread whenever I make a sale because the shipping process has been so easy. So thank you, Jaden's, for letting me test that out, and we're gonna move on to my final thoughts. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this was my first time working with leather, and I genuinely thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, there's something so tactile about it. I mean, same with sewing, but just in a different way. I don't know how to explain it. Not to mention, like, the shaving of the leather and the hole punching is so satisfying. And with leather, you need to be very, very precise. Like, if you're doing this project, measure everything. You know what they say, measure twice, cut once, because there's no going back. Like, once you make a cut or a punch, you cannot put the leather back together. Unlike sewing, which is really forgiving. Like, I have had to take the seam ripper to my pieces many times. So this project did take me a few hours, like a handful of hours, but it's mostly just because you have to be very precise like that and take your time with it. It was definitely a lot of like measuring and double checking things and like making little adjustments here and there, because I really did not want to make a mistake and have to like rebuy more leather, because it's a little pricey. But overall, I am really happy with how this turned out. Like, I think it looks like it's giving that Frye style, and it looks very similar to the Maguire boot, which I'm very happy about. I've already got to wear it out a couple of times, put it to the test, and it's held up very well. I will say though, some more tips when making this is make sure this upper part is not too loose. Like, obviously you don't want to make it too tight, but I actually made mine a little too loose and found that this back piece was sliding all the way down like that when I was walking, which is not good. The solution I found for that is I actually just kind of flip this around. Instead of going from the top, I went from underneath, so that my back piece is now the bottom piece and the bottom piece is now the back piece. And luckily that actually fixed my problem really well, but I'd say just try to do it the correct way. And what I really like about this design is it looks very custom, like it was meant to be here, part of the boot. Some cons to that are, for one, this is custom to this boot. So unfortunately, like, I did try to put this on maybe like some of my other boots I had, like my Doc Martens, but it just didn't fit at all. So that is something to keep in mind. You know, if you do want it to fit multiple boots to get more bang out of your buck, you can definitely like go in and add adjustable buckle details so that you can tighten it and loosen it. But I kind of prioritized the overall style, and that's kind of like a sacrifice I had to make by doing that. Which, speaking of, you can actually buy boot straps online on Etsy. I saw a couple different sellers that were doing it that do have that adjustable strap that might work better for you, but once again, the style is a little bit off. I just preferred having this really custom looking style. And lastly, let's just analyze the cost. So currently on Etsy, you can get a pair of these types of boot straps for $80. Expensive, but after leather making personally myself, I understand why it's that expensive. Whereas if you were to completely make it yourself using all the products I recommended in this video, it would cost you closer to $113. So technically more expensive plus your labor, but it is more custom, and you do have like all the leather making tools that you need after you do this project. Plus, if you already have some of these items like the leather hole punch, a hammer, like most people have a hammer, an X-Acto knife, it's definitely gonna bring the cost down. So you could definitely do it for closer to $80 if you already had some of these things. So personally, truthfully, I feel like for the price it costs to make these, maybe it's more worth it to buy the Etsy version, unless you're genuinely interested in leather making and are actually going to continue this hobby afterwards. Then I'd say for sure 100% it's worth it to invest in all those items, because truthfully, if I didn't have help from my friend and like she let me borrow a lot of her tools, I probably wouldn't have done this. Hopefully, you know, after this video you can weigh your options, you know exactly how to do it. Personally, I am really glad that I did this myself. So anyways, if you guys end up making this, like, please let me know how it goes. Tag me on Instagram. if you end up posting. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week.